Do you remember the brilliant battles of wit between Paul Eddington and Nigel Hawthorne? Behind those scenes, the truth was far darker. Hidden illnesses, broken marriages, and sudden deaths kept in silence. Some faded away quietly. Others met endings no one saw coming. What really happened after the cameras stopped rolling? Let's uncover the truth and honor the cast behind the laughter. Nigel Hawthorne as Sir Humphrey Appleby. Sir Humphrey Appleby wasn't supposed to become the defining force of Yes Minister, until Nigel Hawthorne made him impossible to ignore. The polished suits, the measured voice, that calm authority masking razor-sharp control. Hawthorne, born April 5, 1929 in Coventry, England, was 51 when he stepped into the role, and he played it with a rare balance, elegance on the surface, calculation underneath. But behind that composed, commanding image, his real life was far more fragile and deeply conflicted. For decades, Hawthorne kept his sexuality private until he was abruptly outed during the 1994 Oscar campaign for The Madness of King George. The exposure left him angry and wounded. Though he later openly acknowledged his long relationship with Trevor Bentham, the sense of isolation never fully disappeared. Living in his Hertfordshire home, he once described it as almost a prison, a place where success brought not comfort, but an echoing loneliness that followed him into old age. As the years passed, his greatest battle became physical. In 2000, Hawthorne was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, a devastating illness that led to multiple surgeries over 18 months. The treatments drained him, both physically and emotionally. By Christmas 2001, he had finally returned home from the hospital, hoping to recover in peace. But fate intervened. Just one day after Christmas, he suffered a sudden heart attack, bringing an abrupt end to a long and painful struggle. Nigel Hawthorne passed away at the age of 72 on December 26, 2001, with pancreatic cancer as the underlying illness and a heart attack as the immediate cause. His death came during the quiet aftermath of Christmas, adding a somber note to what should have been a season of rest. He was laid to rest in England, leaving behind a legacy that spanned over 5 decades in theater and film. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $10 million, earned through a career defined not just by acclaim, but by remarkable depth and resilience. Paul Eddington as Jim Hacker. Not loud, not powerful, but unforgettable. Paul Eddington turned Jim Hacker into something rare, a politician audiences could both laugh at and sympathize with. Born on June 18, 1927, in Paddington, London, he was 53 when he stepped into Yes Minister in 1980. With subtle timing and quiet emotional depth, he transformed a seemingly ordinary minister into one of British television's most enduring characters. Yet beyond that composed and gentle presence, his real life told a far more painful story. At just 28 years old, Eddington was diagnosed with a rare and devastating skin cancer, mycosis fungoides. He chose silence. For nearly 4 decades, he endured the disease in secret, hiding his pain even from colleagues. During the filming of The Good Life, the very show that made him a household name, he would quietly leave between scenes just to recover. As the illness progressed, his appearance changed dramatically, sparking cruel rumors in the press. Some even speculated he had AIDS. It wasn't until 1994, under mounting scrutiny, that he finally revealed the truth. Yet even then, he remained dignified, simply saying he hoped to be remembered as someone who caused the least harm possible. Through it all, his greatest strength was his family. He shared 43 years of marriage with his wife, Patricia Scott, who stood beside him through every painful treatment and quiet struggle. Together, they raised 4 children, while Eddington kept his suffering hidden from the outside world. The pressure of performing while battling a worsening condition slowly wore him down, both physically and emotionally. Paul Eddington passed away at the age of 68 on November 4, 1995, in Southwark, London. The underlying cause was mycosis fungoides, a rare skin cancer he had fought for nearly 40 years, compounded by complications from diabetes that left him increasingly weakened in his final months. He was laid to rest in England. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $5 million, earned through decades of dedication to British television, theater, and a career that endured against all odds. Derek Fowlds as Bernard Woolley, caught between loyalty and logic, always just a step behind the chaos, yet impossible to overlook. Derek Fowlds brought Bernard Woolley to life with a quiet sincerity that grounded Yes Minister. Born on September 2, 1937 in Wandsworth, London, he was 43 when he took on the role in 1980, portraying the well-meaning private secretary navigating a world of manipulation and politics with hesitant honesty. It was a performance built not on power, but on humanity. And off-screen, his life held far more weight than his gentle character ever revealed. However, behind the scenes of a career that spanned nearly 6 decades was a long string of personal disappointments. Derek Fowlds went through 2 failed marriages, first with Wendy Torrey, then with the famous TV presenter Leslie Judd, both ending in bitterness. He found some peace with life partner Joe Lindsay, but tragedy struck when she died suddenly in 2012 after 36 years together. From then on, Fowlds lived alone in Bath, carrying a sorrow he rarely expressed, always maintaining the image of the kind man so as not to let others down. After Yes Minister, he took on his longest-running role as Oscar Blaketon in the series Heartbeat, 1992 to 2010. But for the rest of his life, he struggled with feelings of typecasting and being forgotten. Though he owned a cozy home in Bath and had an estimated net worth of around $3 million, Fowlds never reclaimed the spotlight he once had as Bernard Woolley. The quiet decline of fame weighed on him just as much as personal loss. Derek Fowlds passed away at the age of 82 on January 17, 2020, at the Royal United Hospital in Bath. The cause of death was severe pneumonia, which led to heart failure and sepsis after a short illness. His legacy lives on through decades of television, remembered for the kindness and sincerity he brought to every role. John Nettleton as Sir Arnold Robinson. He rarely raised his voice, yet somehow he never needed to. John Nettleton brought a quiet authority to Sir Arnold Robinson, the kind that lingered long after every conversation ended. Born on February 5, 1929 in Sydenham, London, he was 51 when he joined Yes Minister in 1980, embodying the reserved cabinet secretary with subtle control and unwavering composure. His presence wasn't loud, but it was essential. And off-screen, his life carried that same quiet restraint. However, John's off-screen life painted a very different picture. Though he had a long-lasting marriage with actress Deirdre Doone since 1954 and fathered 3 children, he lived a very private life. The role of Sir Arnold, with his stern demeanor and intellectual lines, quickly typecast him in the eyes of the public. Nettleton admitted that the success of Yes Minister was a double-edged sword. It brought fame, but at the same time it suffocated his chances to showcase his depth and range as an actor. In the years that followed, he continued to appear in supporting roles in Brideshead Revisited, Doctor Who, and Midsummer Murders, but rarely received the leading parts he had hoped for. Despite the steady work, there was a quiet sense of limitation that followed him through his later career. Known for his professionalism and consistency, Nettleton remained active across television, theater, and voice acting, yet never fully escaped the shadow of Sir Arnold. In his final years, he chose a life away from attention, living in near seclusion in a modest London home, far from the political intrigue and sharp dialogue that once defined his most famous role. John Nettleton passed away at the age of 94 on July 12, 2023, in London from natural causes. His death was peaceful and largely private, reflecting the same understated life he had lived for decades. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, built through years of steady, disciplined work in acting rather than headline-making fame. Edward Jewesbury as Vic Gould measured, composed, and quietly authoritative. Edward Jewesbury didn't need many lines to leave an impression. Born on August 6, 1917 in Marylebone, London, he was 62 when he appeared as Vic Gould in Yes Minister, bringing a subtle sharpness to the role of a senior official within the political machine. His presence was understated, yet essential. And beyond that calm exterior, his personal life carried a far heavier silence. However, his private life was marked by a somber tone. After marrying Christine Roberts in 1939 and having 2 children, he enjoyed over 4 decades of a peaceful marriage. But the sudden death of his wife in 1982 plunged him into long-lasting loneliness. He never remarried, instead devoting most of his time to books, theater manuscripts, and emotionally demanding roles, most notably as King Henry VI in Richard III, 1995. A quiet home in Surrey and his vintage Rolls-Royce were the few sources of warmth in his otherwise reclusive life. Although his health began to deteriorate in his final years, Jewesbury refused to live dependently and largely disappeared from public events. He chose to age quietly, just like the introspective roles he often portrayed. The theater world continued to speak of him with respect, though few knew about the persistent emptiness that lingered behind the curtain of fame. Edward Jewesbury passed away at the age of 83 on March 31, 2001, in Esher, Surrey. His death came after a period of declining health. He spent his final years in quiet isolation, reflecting the solitary life he had come to accept after personal loss. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, earned through a steady and dignified career across stage, film, and television. John Barron as Sir Ian Whitchurch authority came naturally to him, but it was never the whole story. John Barron, born December 24, 1920, in Marylebone, London, stepped into Yes Minister at the age of 61 as Sir Ian Whitchurch, embodying power with a voice and presence that felt unquestionable. Audiences saw a man perfectly suited to command. Yet behind that polished exterior, there was a life far less controlled. John Barron's personal life was far more complicated than the composed image he portrayed on screen. He went through 3 marriages, the second of which lasted the longest, 40 years, before his wife passed away. In his youth, Barron struggled with severe alcoholism, which made it difficult to maintain family bonds. His relationship with his only daughter grew distant over the years, a regret he carried until the end of his life. Outside the set, Barron was a wine enthusiast and a political man, openly supporting the British Conservative Party. Though he owned a comfortable house in Watford and had a valuable book collection, he always felt his career was confined to rigid roles. Even when he served as chairman of the Actors' Union Equity, he carried a lingering sense that he never truly got to be himself in the world of acting. John Barron passed away at the age of 83 on July 3, 2004. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1.5 million, primarily earned through television royalties and real estate investments. John Savident as Sir Frederick Jumbo Stewart. He didn't just enter a scene, he filled it. John Savident, born January 21, 1938, on the island of Guernsey, brought a booming voice and commanding energy to Yes Minister in 1980 at the age of 42, shaping Sir Frederick Jumbo Stewart into a figure both imposing and unexpectedly amusing. It was the kind of presence that opened doors instantly. But beyond that larger-than-life persona, his real story would take a far more unsettling turn. But the life behind the stage lights was far from glorious. On a night in December 2000, John Savident was stabbed in the neck by a man he had met at a gay bar, right in his own apartment in Manchester. The attack left him not only physically wounded, but also in a prolonged state of psychological trauma. From that point on, Savident gradually withdrew from public life, retreating into seclusion at his Hertfordshire mansion, surrounded by a collection of vintage cars and haunted by the betrayal of trust. His marriage to Rona Hopkinson lasted from 1961, but emotional distance gradually eroded the relationship. Although they had 2 children and several grandchildren, he rarely mentioned them in interviews, and close friends described him as a solitary man after the shock of 2000. Despite a net worth estimated at around $4 million, mainly from consistent earnings through long-term roles and real estate investments, he spent his final years in quiet solitude. John Savident passed away at the age of 86 on February 21, 2024. The cause of death was attributed to old age and natural health-related complications, marking a peaceful end after years of quiet withdrawal from public life. His passing stood in stark contrast to the vibrant, humorous characters he once portrayed, particularly his later fame as Fred Elliot in Coronation Street. Richard Vernon as Sir Desmond Glazebrook. Silver hair, measured voice, and a presence that instantly suggested power, Richard Vernon made aristocracy feel effortless on screen. Born March 7, 1925, he was 55 when he appeared in Yes, Minister, 1980 to 1981, and later, Yes, Prime Minister, 1987, as Sir Desmond Glazebrook, the calculating banker wrapped in upper-class composure. His performances carried authority without force. Yet, behind that polished exterior, his personal life told a far more fragile story. Vernon's personal life was far less smooth than the characters he portrayed. His marriage to actress Benedicta Lee began with hope, but gradually fractured under career pressures and emotional distance. After 35 years together, they divorced in 1990, leaving him with a profound emptiness, especially after his only son left England and cut ties with him. Though he tried to maintain contact with his daughter Sarah, also an actress, Vernon couldn't hide the loneliness and sorrow of his final years, especially as he began battling Parkinson's disease. Vernon's greatest anguish came not only from declining health, but also from the very career he once loved. Despite appearing in over 100 films and television programs, he felt trapped in cold, aristocratic roles lacking depth. Once praised for his lead role in The Man in Room 17, he was increasingly typecast into repetitive supporting characters, as though his career had become a gilded cage. He even went to Zimbabwe to teach acting in an effort to escape the cycle, but eventually returned to London in silence and melancholy. Richard Vernon passed away at the age of 72 on December 4, 1997, due to complications from Parkinson's disease. With a net worth estimated at around $2 million, largely built from decades of work in film, television, and London property, he left behind a legacy defined not only by elegance on screen, but by the quiet struggles he endured off it. Arthur Cox as George, Jim Hacker's driver. You might not notice him at first, but he's always there, steady and observant. Arthur Cox, born April 7, 1934, in Banbridge, Northern Ireland, was 46 when he took on the role of George in Yes, Minister, 1980, portraying Jim Hacker's driver with quiet precision. Without needing the spotlight, he added a subtle layer of truth to the world of politics. And off-screen, his life followed that same quiet rhythm. Though he appeared frequently in British television series such as Doctor Who, The Dominators, 1968, and Agatha Christie's Partners in Crime, Arthur Cox never achieved the same level of fame as his contemporaries. It was a quiet sorrow he rarely expressed, but loved ones said he often felt regret for being consistently limited to supporting roles. His personal life was also filled with silence. He had no children, and his marriage was described as stable but distant. His partner, a literature teacher, often lived away from home due to work, leaving Cox to spend most of his time in a small London apartment with books and memories of his career. The final years of his life were marked by quiet withdrawal as illness forced him to step away from the stage. Once energetic, he began to suffer from joint problems and memory decline, which made line memorization too difficult. As old friends passed away, acting offers became scarce, and loneliness crept in. Though he never faced financial hardship, his net worth was estimated at only about $1 million, enough for a modest life, not luxurious, but lived with dignity. Arthur Cox passed away at the age of 87 on April 9, 2021, just 2 days after his birthday. The cause of death was reported as natural causes, following a period of declining health in his later years. He left behind a legacy of subtle performances that, while often unnoticed, added depth and authenticity to British television. Tenniel Evans as Martin, a steady voice, a composed presence, never flashy but always convincing. Tenniel Evans, born May 17, 1926, in Nairobi, Kenya, was 54 when he appeared in Yes Minister as Martin, the British Foreign Secretary, delivering authority with quiet restraint. It was a brief role, yet unmistakably refined. And beyond that dignified image, his life carried a quieter, more complicated story. Despite a career spanning more than 50 years, Tenniel Evans always lived in the shadow of more famous peers such as John Pertwee and Michael Palin. His tireless dedication to theater and television was never quite rewarded with the fame it deserved. Behind the stage lights, he was a devoted husband to Evangeline Banks, his wife from 1953 until his final days. However, the demands of his work kept him away from home often, and although he had 3 children, emotional distance grew within the family over time. Evans' life took an unexpected turn in 1985 when he was ordained as a minister of the Church of England, living a dual life between performance and spiritual service. Even so, he often felt that he would be remembered only for his supporting roles, a quiet regret that stayed with him. In his final years, he was diagnosed with emphysema, forcing him to withdraw from acting and settle into a modest home in Buckinghamshire, where he spent his days practicing calligraphy and reading the Bible. Tenniel Evans passed away at the age of 83 on June 10, 2009, just days after his birthday, due to complications from lung disease, including emphysema. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million, earned through decades of steady work in television, radio, and theater, along with his later contributions to the church. Norman Bird as Brian Baker. He blended in so naturally, you almost forgot he was acting. Norman Bird, born October 30th, 1924 in Colville, Leicestershire, was 56 when he appeared in Yes Minister as Brian Baker, bringing a subtle, observant edge to the bureaucratic world of the series. His performance didn't demand attention. It earned it quietly. And beyond that understated presence, his personal life carried a deeper, unspoken weight. Although his career spanned both film and television with over 200 roles, Bird's personal life was filled with inner struggles. He married actress Nona Blameyer in 1953, and their marriage lasted for decades, but not without its tensions. One of Bird's silent pains was their inability to have children, a wound he rarely spoke about, but which friends described as something that never truly healed. As he grew older, acting opportunities gradually dried up. He lived quietly in a small house in Wolverhampton, relying on savings and cautious investments, but never achieving true wealth. The absence of the stage and the camera eventually led Bird into depression. He became increasingly withdrawn, avoided artist gatherings, and was mostly absent from public life throughout the 1990s. One of his final roles was as a taxi driver in Shadowlands, 1993, directed by Richard Attenborough, a small but emotional part that felt like a quiet farewell from a devoted artist. Norman Bird passed away at the age of 80 on April 22, 2005, after a long battle with cancer. His final years were marked by declining health and increasing isolation, far removed from the busy sets that once defined his life. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million. Nigel Stock as Sir Mark Spencer. Cool-headed, precise, and quietly intimidating. Nigel Stock gave Sir Mark Spencer a presence that felt effortlessly controlled. Born on September 21, 1919, he was 62 when he appeared in Yes, Minister, embodying a high-ranking official whose authority came from restraint rather than force. It wasn't a leading role, but it lingered. And beyond that composed exterior, his real life told a far more unsettled story. Nigel Stock's life behind the spotlight was not as smooth as the composed figures he played. His first marriage in 1943 ended quickly after 4 years, leaving behind a son who lived with his mother and a heartbreak that never fully healed. He remarried in 1951 and had 3 more children, but his demanding career, constant travel, and rumors of infidelity caused increasing tension within the family. By 1980, his second marriage ended in weary estrangement. Although he married actress Rachenda Carey in 1979, a long shadow of loneliness still loomed over his life. On screen, he was known for calm, thoughtful characters, such as Dr. Watson in Sherlock Holmes, 1964 to 1968. But in reality, Nigel struggled financially. His television paychecks were just enough to maintain a modest home in North London and an old Jaguar. As acting work became increasingly scarce, he accepted every small role he could, even when his health was declining. Nigel Stock passed away at the age of 66 on June 23, 1986, after suffering a sudden heart attack at his home. His death came shortly after completing a stage performance of Mumbo Jumbo alongside his wife, giving his final moments an almost theatrical sense of closure. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at around $500,000. Ian Lavender, as Dr. Richard Cartwright, forever remembered as the young one, yet carrying far more depth than that label ever allowed. Ian Lavender, born February 16, 1946, in Birmingham, England, was 36 when he took on the role of Dr. Richard Cartwright, bringing sincerity and quiet emotional weight to the screen. His performance felt genuine, almost fragile at times. But beyond that familiar face, his life was marked by battles far more personal than any role he played. But behind a career that spanned over 50 years was a life far from peaceful. Lavender battled bladder cancer in the late 1990s, followed by a serious heart attack in 2004. These health crises not only weakened him physically, but also led to profound emotional struggles. His first marriage ended with regret and guilt, as he couldn't spend enough time with his 2 sons due to his hectic schedule. Although he remarried Michelle Hardy in 1993 and found a more stable home life, Lavender remained torn between his past and present. His fame from Dad's Army was a double-edged sword. While the role of Pike brought him public recognition, Lavender feared being typecast forever as the naive young lad. After years dedicated to film, television, theater, and radio, he gradually withdrew from the spotlight. Loneliness, the pressure of life after fame, and long nights battling health complications eventually led him to retreat from public view in his later years. Still, he quietly contributed to smaller projects and was cherished by those who appreciated the sincerity of his acting. Ian Lavender passed away on February 2, 2024, in Suffolk, England, at the age of 77, just 2 weeks before his 78th birthday. His death followed a period of declining health after years of battling serious illness, including cancer and heart complications. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, earned through a long and dedicated career in acting, as well as careful investments over the years. They once made us laugh with their razor-sharp wit and perfectly timed exchanges. But in the end, each of them slipped away quietly, far from the spotlight. Behind the brilliance of comedy, how many silent battles were never seen? Which of these faces stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if these stories moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold journeys behind the world of British television.